My mother always sided with my older brother, Caleb, but when he stole my younger brother Logan's fiancée, our family shattered beyond repair. Now, my mother expects us to act as though nothing happened, to simply overlook the fact that Caleb, her so-called golden child, betrayed Logan in the most despicable way. A year ago, I would have laughed if someone had told me our family would end up like this. I never imagined Caleb, the one our mother held up as the perfect son, could do something so cruel. Yet here I am, sitting in my apartment, replaying the events of the past few weeks like a nightmare I can't escape. It all began with Logan's wedding, or what should have been his wedding. Logan is the kindest, most selfless person I know. He's the type of person who would give you his last dollar without a second thought. When he proposed to Avery, we were all thrilled. They seemed perfect for each other. Avery was smart, funny, and deeply in love with Logan, or so we thought. Together, they were the kind of couple that made you believe in soulmates. And then there was Caleb. Even now, the timeline feels hazy. One week, Logan and Avery were finalizing the guest list and choosing flowers. The next, Avery was canceling the wedding. I remember the day Logan showed up at my door, utterly devastated. His face was pale, his eyes red from crying. He told me Avery had ended things with no explanation, just that she couldn't go through with it. At first, I thought it might be cold feet. Weddings are stressful, after all, but soon, the truth came out. Less than 3 days later, at a family barbecue my mother Linda hosted, Caleb and Avery showed up together, hand in hand. I'll never forget the way they strolled into the backyard as though nothing was wrong. The whole yard fell silent, like someone had pressed pause on reality. I stared at them in disbelief, glancing between Caleb and Avery, hoping I was misunderstanding. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, louder than I intended. Caleb, ever the king of smugness, shrugged as though it was no big deal. "Avery and I are together now," he said, his voice maddeningly casual. Thankfully, Logan wasn't there to see it, but my sister Riley was so shocked she dropped the pitcher of lemonade she'd been holding, shattering it on the patio. My mother's face was unreadable as she looked at Caleb, not shocked, not angry. That was my first clue. Linda hadn't warned anyone, but she clearly wasn't surprised. She must have known. "You're kidding," I said, my voice trembling. Avery couldn't meet my eyes, her face flushing with guilt as she stared at the ground. Caleb, meanwhile, wore the same infuriatingly calm expression he always used to defuse situations. It only made me angrier. And that was just the beginning. "It's complicated, Mason, but this is for the best, for everyone." "Everyone?" I snapped, my anger boiling over. "What about Logan? You stole his fiancée, Caleb. How does that help him?" The word stole made Avery flinch, but Caleb remained unfazed. "The relationship between her and Logan wasn't working," Caleb said, his tone infuriatingly calm. "This wasn't planned." I didn't let him finish. Too furious to even look at him, I stormed away into the kitchen. Riley followed shortly after, her face pale and trembling. "Did you see Mom?" she asked. "She didn't say a word. She's fine with this." That was my second warning sign. Caleb had always been Linda's favorite. As the eldest, he was the golden child, the college graduate with the corporate career, the pride of the family. Logan and I, we were just there. I used to joke that we were the spare parts of the family, but it didn't feel funny anymore. Later that evening, I called Logan. I needed to know if he was aware of what had happened. He wasn't. When I told him, his voice was hollow, almost resigned. "Of course it was Caleb," he said quietly. "It's always Caleb." The fallout was swift. Riley cut off all contact with Caleb immediately. When I tried to confront him again, he dismissed me, calling me dramatic. A few days later, my mother called. Her voice was unsettlingly calm. "Mason, we need to talk," she said. "About what?" I asked, still fuming over Caleb and Avery. "This weekend, we're having dinner at the house. Riley and you should come. It's time to move past this." "Move past this?" I repeated, incredulous. "Avery betrayed Logan. She broke his heart. And Caleb, I know it's hard," she interrupted gently, "but Caleb is still your brother. He made a mistake, yes, but he's happy now. Isn't that what matters?" I was speechless. My mother, the one who was supposed to treat us all equally, was once again taking Caleb's side. When I told Riley about the dinner, she rolled her eyes. "You've got to be kidding me. She's trying to pretend everything is normal." I couldn't disagree, but I decided to go, not for Mom or Caleb, but for Logan. I needed him to know he still had support. When I arrived at my parents' house on Saturday, Riley was already there, sitting on the porch with her arms crossed. "This is going to be a disaster," she said as I approached. "I know," I replied, not even bothering to argue. Inside, Caleb sat at the dining table, smiling like he hadn't torn the family apart. Avery was beside him, looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. At the head of the table, Linda was beaming as if this were just another family dinner. "Come sit," she said cheerfully. "We're going to have a nice family meal." Riley muttered under her breath, "I'd rather eat glass." I couldn't blame her. The sight of Caleb and Avery sitting together made my blood boil. Caleb had one arm draped casually over the back of her chair, looking completely at ease. Avery, on the other hand, kept her head down, staring at her plate like it held all the answers. "Where's Logan?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Linda shot me a warning look. "Logan decided not to come." "Yeah, no kidding," Riley muttered. "Wonder why?" Linda's expression hardened, but she said nothing. I turned to Caleb, unable to hold back any longer. "So, Caleb, you're just okay with all of this?" He looked up at me with that infuriatingly calm expression. "What do you mean by this, Mason?" "This," I snapped, gesturing between him and Avery. "You took Logan's fiancée, the same Logan who trusted you enough to ask you to be his best man. Are you kidding me?" With a heavy sigh, Caleb set down his butter knife, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Mason, this wasn't planned. Avery and I, things just happened." "Things just happened?" Riley leaned forward, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You don't just happen to date your brother's fiancée." Caleb winced but said nothing. Avery still wouldn't look at us. Finally, Caleb ran a hand through his hair, clearly irritated. "I'm not going to sit here and let you two attack us. Avery and I are happy together. We don't need your approval." "Happy?" I shot back. "You think this is honest? You didn't even have the guts to tell Logan yourself. Avery had to be the one to call off the wedding." "That's enough," Linda said sharply, her voice cutting through the tension. She fixed me with a disapproving glare, the same one she'd used when I acted out as a child. But I wasn't a child anymore, and I wasn't about to back down. "We're not going to spend this dinner yelling at each other like children," Linda said firmly. Riley pushed her plate away, glaring. "Then maybe Caleb shouldn't have acted like one." "Riley, please," Linda said, her voice strained. "This isn't helping. Caleb and Avery are here because they're trying to move forward as a family. We all need to forgive and let this go." "Forgive and let this go?" I repeated slowly, disbelief tightening my chest. "So, you're just okay with this? You're okay with what Caleb did to Logan?" Linda's expression softened, the way it always did when she thought I wasn't grasping some deep life lesson. "Life is complicated, Mason. People make mistakes, but they deserve a chance to be happy." "Happy?" Riley's fist slammed against the table, making the dishes rattle. "Logan is miserable, Mom. You're acting like none of this matters. You're sitting here, playing hostess like it's Thanksgiving, after Caleb humiliated him." Caleb's chair scraped against the floor as he stood abruptly. "You know what? I don't have to sit here and let you attack me in my own home. Sit down." My voice was low and sharp, surprising even myself. I was done watching Caleb walk away from every mess he created. "You don't get to show up here with Avery, act like nothing happened, and then make us the bad guys." Finally, Avery spoke, her voice shaky and uncertain. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I turned to her, my anger laced with disbelief. "Then why did it?" Avery hesitated, glancing at Caleb as though seeking permission to speak. When he said nothing, she drew a shaky breath and continued. "Caleb and we started talking months ago. At first, it was innocent, but then he told me things about Logan. Things that made me doubt everything." "What things?" Riley asked sharply. Avery faltered. "He said Logan didn't really love me, that he was just going through the motions because he felt like he had to settle down." I froze, the pieces falling into place. Caleb had been manipulating her, sowing seeds of doubt for months. That was Caleb, charming, cunning, and utterly selfish. "You've got to be kidding me," Riley said, her tone dripping with disgust. "You let Caleb convince you Logan didn't love you? Logan adored you, Avery. Anyone could see it." Avery winced, but Caleb stepped in front of her, his tone icy. "We're not going to sit here and let you attack Avery. This conversation is over." "Fine," I said, rising from my seat. "Then I guess I'll have this conversation with Logan instead. I'm sure he'll love hearing how his own brother sabotaged his relationship behind his back." "Mason," Linda started, but I cut her off. "Logan deserves better than this, Mom. If you can't see that, I don't know what to tell you." Riley followed me as I stormed out of the house. The door slammed shut behind us, and she exhaled loudly, as though she'd been holding her breath. Unbelievable. Caleb's not even sorry. He actually believes his own lies. I didn't respond. My head was spinning, replaying Avery's admission. This wasn't some accidental romance. It was calculated. Caleb had been planting doubts in Avery's mind for months, and for some reason, Linda was pretending not to see it. As we climbed into Riley's car, she turned to me. "We have to tell Logan." "I know," I said, "but this isn't over." And I was right. It wasn't. The drive to Logan's place was silent, the hum of the engine the only sound between us. Both of us were lost in thought, wondering how we were going to explain this to Logan. It was one thing for Avery to call off the wedding, but knowing Caleb had been deceiving her for months, that was a whole new level of betrayal. When we arrived, I half expected Logan not to answer the door. Since the breakup, he'd been a ghost, barely responding to texts. But the door creaked open, revealing him standing there, pale and gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. "Hey," he said, his voice hoarse. "Didn't think I'd see you guys tonight. Can we come in?" I asked. After a moment of hesitation, he stepped aside. The apartment was as worn down as he was. The curtains were drawn, the couch looked like it had become his bed, and takeout containers were piled on the coffee table. Logan let out a dry, humorless laugh as he caught me looking around. "Yeah, I know. It's a mess." He swept some papers off the couch and motioned for us to sit. "Have a seat." He remained standing, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, his eyes darting between us. "What's up?" he finally asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. Riley didn't hesitate. "Logan, we need to tell you something about Caleb." At the mention of Caleb's name, Logan stiffened. His jaw clenched and his eyes darkened. "I don't want to talk about him." "Logan," I said quietly, "you need to hear this." "You need to hear this," I said. "It's about what really happened with Avery." At the mention of her name, Logan flinched. For a moment, I thought he might throw us out. Instead, he let out a shaky breath and sank into the armchair across from us. "Fine," he said quietly. "Say whatever you came here to say." I didn't sugarcoat it. Logan deserved the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Avery told us tonight that Caleb had been talking to her for months. He told her things that made her believe you didn't really love her. At first, Logan didn't react. He just stared at me, unblinking and motionless, as if the words hadn't registered. Then he looked away, his fists clenching against his thighs. His voice, barely audible, broke the silence. "So Caleb convinced her to leave me. Manipulated her," Riley added, her voice sharp. "He got in her head, Logan. Made her think you were just settling for her." Logan gave a bitter laugh, devoid of humor. "Of course he did. That's Caleb. He's always been good at taking things that don't belong to him." The anger in his voice caught me off guard. Logan was the steady one in the family, the quiet anchor. Riley was the firecracker, and I was the mediator, always caught in the middle. Logan didn't get angry. He got sad. But now, his expression was hard, his tone cutting. "He's done this before," Logan said suddenly, staring at the floor. "What do you mean?" Riley asked, her brow furrowing. Logan's gaze darkened as he looked up. "Do you honestly think this is the first time Caleb's taken something that was mine? Remember my senior year soccer tryout?" I frowned, trying to recall. "Yeah, you didn't make the team." "No," Logan said, his lips curling into a bitter smile. "I did. But Caleb convinced the coach he was a better option and that I wasn't reliable. Even though I made the squad, I got cut. It took me years to find out. Caleb made varsity, and I was dismissed." "What?" Riley's eyes widened in shock. "Why didn't you tell us?" Logan shrugged. "Because no one would have believed me. Caleb's the golden boy. He can do no wrong." Hearing this, something clicked in my mind. Caleb had always been the center of Mom's world. Charming, ambitious, self-assured. The perfect eldest son. But now, the cracks were showing. Caleb didn't just take what he wanted. He took it to prove he was better, no matter who got hurt. "Logan," I asked slowly, "why do you think he did this to Avery now?" Logan gave me a hollow look. "Because he could." His voice was flat, but there was a bitterness beneath it. "I've always made Caleb jealous. He's good at hiding it, but it's there. He saw how happy I was with Avery, so he decided to take her, just like he's taken everything else." He wasn't wrong. This wasn't just about Avery. It was about Caleb's need to dominate, to prove he was superior. The room fell silent. Riley looked like she wanted to punch a wall, and I felt sick to my stomach. Logan wiped his face with his hand and said quietly, "You know what hurts the most? I loved her. I loved her so much, and I trusted Caleb. I thought he was happy for me." "I'm sorry," I murmured. the words feeling inadequate. Logan shook his head. Don't apologize to me. Just tell me what you're going to do about it. Riley frowned. What are you saying? I mean, Caleb's not done, Logan said harshly. You think this is it? That he's just going to stop? Mom's already on his side. I'm the bad guy for not letting it go, but Caleb will keep twisting things until everyone forgives him. That's what he does. Riley and I exchanged a look. As much as I hated to admit it, Logan was right. Mom had already started paving the way for Caleb's redemption, and if we didn't act, he'd come out on top, just like always. Mom needs to see what's going on, Riley said, her voice firm. We need to talk to her. She can't keep defending him. Good luck with that, Logan scoffed. Mom's been making excuses for Caleb my entire life. She's not going to stop now. Logan wasn't wrong. Mom had always turned a blind eye to Caleb's behavior, excusing it as ambition or charm. But now, it had gone too far. As I looked at Logan sitting in his worn-out apartment, one thing became clear. Caleb wasn't going to get away with this. This time, I said firmly, we're not going to let him win. Logan stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. Good, he said quietly, because I'm done being Caleb's punching bag. As Riley and I left Logan's apartment that evening, something shifted in me. I was done being kind, done letting Caleb bulldoze everyone while Linda stood by and cheered him on. It was time to confront Caleb head-on, and this time, I wouldn't hold back. Riley and I quickly agreed on what needed to happen. Caleb wasn't just going to be confronted about Avery. This was about everything he'd done for years. The manipulation, the lies, the way he twisted situations to make himself look like the golden child, while everyone else was left to pick up the pieces. Logan was right. Caleb wouldn't stop unless he was made to, and we were going to make him. The next morning, we showed up unannounced at our parents' house. Linda opened the door, her expression a mix of surprise and exhaustion, like she'd spent the night worrying. Good. She forced a tight smile. Mason, Riley, what are you doing here? We need to talk to Caleb, I said, brushing past her into the living room. Linda groaned, closing the door behind us. This again? Can't you just— No, Mom, we can't, Riley interrupted, turning to glare at her. Is Caleb here? Linda hesitated before sighing. He's upstairs, but I don't see why you— Perfect, I muttered, already heading for the stairs. Mason, Linda called after me, her voice stern. Don't start anything. But I didn't care what Linda thought anymore. She'd let Caleb get away with too much for too long. Someone had to do what she wouldn't. Riley and I marched up the stairs and down the hallway to Caleb's old bedroom. The door was ajar, so I pushed it open without knocking. Caleb was sitting on his bed, his laptop open. When he saw us, his expression twisted into a smug mix of annoyance and amusement. To what do I owe this honor? He said, shutting his laptop and leaning back against the wall. Here to lecture me again? I crossed my arms. We're here for answers, not a lecture. Caleb rolled his eyes. I've already explained everything. I didn't plan this with Avery. It just happened. Why can't you all accept that and move on? Because it's a lie, Riley snapped. Avery told us you'd been messing with her head for months. You were sabotaging her relationship with Logan the whole time. Caleb's face reddened, but the smugness lingered. So, relationships end all the time. It's not my fault Logan couldn't keep her. I stepped closer, fists clenched. You think this is a game, don't you? You're not even sorry. Why would I be? Caleb shot back. Logan was never right for her. I treated her better than he ever did. You took her, Riley yelled, her voice shaking with anger. You can't stand seeing other people happy, so you manipulated her into leaving Logan. Watch it, Riley, Caleb warned, standing up. His tone turned icy. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, we know exactly what we're talking about, I said, my voice low and firm. You've been pulling this crap for years, stealing what's Logan's, undermining him, pretending to be the perfect son while the rest of us pay the price. You're being dramatic, Caleb said with a grin. Am I? I shot back. Logan told us about the soccer team, how you convinced the coach to cut him so you could take his spot. Sound familiar? For a moment, Caleb's grin faltered, but it quickly returned. That was years ago. Who cares? Logan cares, Riley said, her voice rising. Just like you ruined that for him, you ruined this. Caleb let out a bitter laugh. You two are unbelievable. You really think I'm the bad guy? Logan's pathetic. He always has been. He lets people walk all over him because he's weak. Avery chose me because I'm better than him. I didn't steal her. Riley stepped forward, jabbing a finger at his chest. You're not better than anyone, Caleb. The only reason you get away with being a manipulative liar is because Mom lets you. Leave Mom out of this, Caleb snarled. Why? Riley shot back. We all know you're her favorite. No matter what you do, she'll defend you. At that moment, Linda appeared in the doorway. What is going on in here? She demanded, her voice sharp. Riley turned to face her. Ask your perfect son, she said. He just admitted to manipulating Avery into leaving Logan. Linda's face went pale as she turned to Caleb. Is that true? Of course not, Caleb said smoothly, his voice dripping with false innocence. Mom, they're twisting my words. I didn't do it. You're twisting my words, Caleb protested, his voice rising defensively. Avery chose me because I'm better suited for her, not because I manipulated her. Riley's eyes blazed as she shot back. You literally claimed she picked you because you're superior to Logan. Linda's face remained unreadable, but her silence was deafening as she turned to Caleb. He met her gaze with the wide, innocent look he always used to wriggle out of trouble. Come on, Mom, Caleb said smoothly. You know me. I would never do something like that. For a fleeting moment, I dared to hope Linda might finally see Caleb for who he truly was. But then her expression faltered, doubt creeping in, and, just as always, she folded. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding, she said, her voice tight. We're not going to solve anything by shouting at each other. Riley let out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. You're still defending him. Riley stiffened, her voice trembling with anger. No, we're done with you. Caleb's smug demeanor faltered. What's that supposed to mean? He asked, narrowing his eyes. It means Logan's done. Riley's done. And so am I said coldly. You're on your own now, Caleb. We're not letting you win this time. You can't just cut me out of the family, Caleb said, for once looking genuinely shaken. Watch us, Riley replied icily. I turned to Linda, who stood frozen in the doorway, stunned. Mom, you can keep pretending Caleb's perfect all you want, but the rest of us are done playing along. You need to decide, are you with us or with him? Her eyes filled with disbelief, as if I had just slapped her. You can't ask me to choose, she said. You've already chosen, Riley said softly, her voice heavy with finality. For the first time, Caleb seemed to realize he'd pushed too far. He didn't have a witty comeback or an arrogant shrug as we turned to leave. He stood in stunned silence, watching us go. As Riley and I walked out of the house, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. Caleb might not face real consequences today, but one thing was certain, he wouldn't be able to lean on us anymore. Sooner or later, people like him always face the fallout. And this time, I wasn't going to catch him when he fell. In the days that followed, neither Caleb nor Linda reached out. I had a strong suspicion they were waiting for us to come crawling back, as we always had. That was the cycle. Caleb messed up, Linda smoothed things over, and the rest of us were expected to stay silent to keep the peace. But not this time. When we told Logan about the confrontation, he actually smiled, a weary, vindicated smile. It's about time, he muttered, shaking his head. For the first time, Riley, Logan, and I were united in our decision. Caleb was no longer our responsibility, and if Linda wanted to cling to him, that was on her. Over the next week, Linda tried to reach out. She called and texted, her messages all the same. Family doesn't behave like this. Caleb is your brother. I understand you're upset, but this has gone too far. Let's talk about this over dinner. We ignored her. For once, we were free. But Caleb wasn't done. On Thursday night, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but something compelled me to pick up. Hello, Mason, came a voice I recognized immediately. I paused, caught off guard. Caleb, I need to talk to you, he said, his tone unusually unsteady. What do you want? I asked flatly. He hesitated, then his voice cracked. It's important. Please. Caleb never asked for anything. He demanded, manipulated, coerced. But this was different. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Fine, I said, not over the phone. Meet me at the depot in an hour. The depot was an old diner we used to visit as kids. I didn't want to go, but something about Caleb's desperation made it impossible to ignore. When I arrived, I barely recognized him. He was slumped in a booth in the corner, dark circles under his eyes, his usually impeccable hair disheveled. What do you want, Caleb? I asked, sliding into the seat across from him. For a moment, he didn't answer. His fingers tapped nervously against the table as he stared down at his hands. Finally, he whispered, I messed up. With a bitter laugh, I said, yeah, no kidding. No, Mason, Caleb said, his voice trembling. I made a huge mistake, bigger than you think. I had never seen him this afraid before, and the way he said it made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. What are you talking about? I asked cautiously. Caleb took a shaky breath before exhaling, his voice unsteady. I'm in trouble, big trouble. For the first time, I saw panic in his eyes as he looked up at me, What kind of trouble? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. Caleb ran a trembling hand through his disheveled hair. I owe a lot of people a lot of money, he admitted. I tried to fix it, Mason, but things got out of control. His voice cracked, and then, almost in a whisper, he added, Avery. I felt my stomach drop. What about Avery? I asked, dreading the answer. Caleb looked down, his expression one of shame I'd never seen before. I needed money, he confessed. I thought if I got closer to Avery, maybe she'd help me. Her family's rich, and I figured. You used her? I interrupted, my voice rising in anger. You used Avery to dig yourself out of debt? Caleb flinched, but didn't deny it. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said defensively. I didn't expect her to leave Logan for me, but once it started, I couldn't stop it. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Caleb hadn't stolen Logan's fiancée just to prove a point or feed his ego. He'd done it out of sheer desperation. He had manipulated Avery, shattered Logan's world, and torn our family apart, all to cover up the mess he'd created for himself. I stared at him, struggling to process everything he just confessed. Does Mom know? I asked quietly. No, and she can't, Caleb said, shaking his head furiously. If she finds out, he trailed off, his voice trembling again. She'll finally see you for who you really are, I said coldly. Good. She deserves to know the truth. Please, Mason, Caleb begged, his voice breaking. I need your help. I've got no one else. Help you? I said, incredulous. After everything you've done? Are you serious? You're my brother, Caleb pleaded. Family is supposed to stick together. Don't you dare play the family card, I snapped. Not after what you did to Logan. You don't get to hide behind that now. Caleb looked at me with desperation, like a drowning man reaching for a lifeline. Please, he whispered. I can't fix this without you. For the first time in my life, I felt nothing for Caleb. No anger, no pity, just emptiness. He wasn't my brother anymore. He was just a man who had destroyed every meaningful relationship in his life. I stood up, my decision clear. Caleb, you need help, I said, my voice steady. But it's not going to come from me. He opened his mouth to argue, but I didn't wait to hear it. I turned and walked away. Later that night, Riley and Logan came over to my place. When I told them what Caleb had confessed, neither of them looked surprised. He's always been like this, Logan said with a resigned sigh. It just took him this long to fall apart. What about Mom? Riley asked. Should we tell her? I thought about it for a long moment before shaking my head. No, she's made her choice. If she wants to keep believing Caleb is perfect, let her. But we're done. With him, with her, with all of it. I had spent my entire life trying to hold this family together, but now I understood that sometimes you have to let things fall apart. For the first time in years, I felt free. Neither Caleb nor Linda was my responsibility anymore. Logan glanced at me and Riley, a faint smile on his lips. Do you think we'll be okay? I'm not defending anyone, Linda replied, her tone sharp. But I'm not going to let this family tear itself apart over a failed relationship. This family is already falling apart, I said quietly. And it's because of Caleb. Caleb gave a bored shrug, his arrogance cutting through the tension. Cry about it, he said dismissively. I smiled back, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. Yeah, I said confidently. We'll be okay. And for the first time, I truly believed it. Thanks for watching. If you love the story, please give it a thumbs up, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.